On what should have been a normal afternoon, my daughter-in-law's sister arrived, tears in her eyes. She confessed my husband of 42 years was having an affair with my daughter-in-law, who then laughed, dismissing her and calling me old and boring. I simply offered tea. You see, some games require patience. If you've ever felt betrayed, you'll understand this is my story. Please like and share it, and tell us where you're listening from. The scent of fresh roses and lemon zest usually filled Elara's kitchen with a comforting embrace, but today, an unusual chill seemed to permeate the air. At 64, Elara had cultivated a life of quiet elegance, her home a testament to decades of careful nurturing. She was preparing for Lyra's visit, Celeste's younger sister, and an odd premonition clung to her. There was an unspoken tension whenever Lyra was around, a nervous energy that hinted at something unsaid, a secret simmering beneath her polite facade. Elara had always liked Lyra, finding her more genuine and less self-serving than her older sister Celeste, who was married to Elara's son Leo. Yet a shadow always seemed to follow Lyra when Celeste's name came up, a subtle flinch, a hurried change of subject. The doorbell chimed, a gentle sound that always reminded Elara of happier times, but today it felt like a summons. She opened the door to find Lyra standing on her porch, not with her usual bright smile, but with a face etched with distress. Her shoulders were hunched, and she clutched her handbag as if it were a lifeline. Her eyes, usually sparkling with life, were red-rimmed and darted around nervously. "Lyra, my dear," Elara said, her voice soft with concern. Come in, come in. You look like you've seen a ghost." Lyra stepped inside, her movements stiff and jerky. She didn't meet Elara's gaze directly, instead fixing her eyes on the antique grandfather clock in the hall. Elara led her into the sunlit conservatory, where a small table was set with delicate china. Freshly brewed tea steamed in teacups, alongside a plate of Elara's famous cucumber sandwiches and a slice of her irresistible lemon poppy seed cake. She had made them especially for Lyra, knowing they were her favorites. "I thought you might need a little pick-me-up," Elara offered, gesturing to the spread. Lyra sank into a wicker chair, but made no move to eat. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed her purse on the table, still clutching its strap. "Thank you, Elara," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "but I don't think I can. I, I have something to tell you." A knot tightened in Elara's stomach. This was it. The unspoken tension, the premonition, all converging. "What is it, dear?" she asked, her voice steady despite the sudden surge of anxiety. "You can tell me anything." Lyra took a deep, shuddering breath, her eyes finally locking with Elara's, brimming with unshed tears. It's about Celeste," she began, then hesitated, her gaze flickering away. And Arthur." Elara felt a sudden lurch, as if the ground beneath her had shifted. Arthur. Her Arthur. Her husband of 42 years. A cold dread seeped into her bones. She waited perfectly still, her heart thudding against her ribs. "They're having an affair," Lyra finally blurted out, the words tumbling out in a rush, a gasp for air. "Celeste and Arthur, they're seeing each other. Elara's world tilted. The sunlit conservatory seemed to dim, the scent of roses suddenly cloying. "No," she breathed, the single word a frail whisper against the enormity of the accusation. That's impossible. Arthur wouldn't. Celeste wouldn't." Lyra shook her head, tears finally overflowing and tracing paths down her pale cheeks. "I saw them, Elara, last week, downtown near the gallery. They were kissing. I couldn't believe it. I followed Celeste afterwards to her apartment. I confronted her." A wave of nausea washed over Elara. Kissing, Arthur and Celeste, her son's wife. The betrayal was a physical blow, sharper and more vicious than anything she could have imagined. "What did she say?" Elara managed, her voice barely audible. Lyra scoffed, a bitter sound. "She laughed, Elara. She actually laughed. She told me I was naive, a fool. She said it was none of my business and to stay out of it. And then," Lyra paused, her voice hardening with indignation. She said you were old and boring, that Arthur deserved someone exciting, someone young and vibrant like her." The insult, stark and cruel, landed like a slap across Elara's face. Old and boring. After 42 years, the woman her son married was not only betraying her son, but was now openly mocking her, dismissing their long marriage. It was a calculated cruelty, designed to inflict maximum pain. And that wasn't all, Lyra continued, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. She told me, she said she only married Leo for the money, for the family name. She said she'd been planning this for years, waiting for the right moment. She said she was going to make sure you got as little as possible after the divorce, that you'd be left with nothing. Elara felt a cold, hollow ache spread through her chest. It wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated, insidious plot, meticulously orchestrated to steal everything from her and her son. 42 years of marriage, a lifetime of building a family, crumbling into dust because of one woman's insatiable greed and malice. The devastation was profound, a chasm opening beneath her very being. This wasn't just a transgression of the heart, it was a robbery of her life. Why, Lyra? Elara asked, her voice surprisingly calm, almost detached. Why are you telling me this? Lyra's gaze was earnest, unwavering. Because it's wrong, Elara. What she's doing is wrong. You don't deserve this. Leo doesn't deserve this. She's been manipulating Arthur for months, maybe even years. I just didn't see it until now. I never wanted to believe it, but I saw her with him. The way she looks at him, the way she touches him, it's disgusting. The image of Celeste, her daughter-in-law, manipulating her kind, often naive husband, twisted Elara's stomach. Arthur, usually so devoted, so predictable, had been ensnared in Celeste's web, a puppet in her cruel scheme. Does Leo know? Elara asked, her thoughts already racing, formulating plans she hadn't yet consciously acknowledged. Lyra's eyes widened in horror. No, oh, Elara, you can't tell him, not yet. It would destroy him. He loves Celeste so much, it would absolutely break him into a million pieces. Elara looked out past the conservatory, her gaze settling on her beloved rose garden, vibrant with life even in late summer. Each bloom a testament to patience, to careful cultivation, to resilience. The thought of Leo's heartbreak was a raw wound, but so was the thought of her own life being dismantled by a calculating predator. She would not let that happen. A quiet resolve settled over her, chilling and steady. Then we won't tell him, Elara said, her voice firm, resolute. Not yet. And you, Lyra, you will not speak of this to anyone, not a soul. Do you understand? Lyra nodded, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and reluctant admiration. Good, Elara continued, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. Some games require patience, Lyra, a great deal of patience. And I have been patient for a very long time. Celeste may think she's clever, but she has underestimated me. Elara poured herself a cup of tea, the delicate china clinking softly. She had been old and boring for Celeste, a forgotten matriarch, a pawn to be moved aside. But an old tree, she mused, had roots that ran deep, foundations that could withstand the fiercest storms. And sometimes, she thought, looking out at her serene garden, sometimes you have to let your enemies think they've already won. The days following Lyra's visit were a surreal tapestry woven with normalcy and a searing undercurrent of deceit. Elara moved through her familiar routines with an unsettling grace, each forced smile and pleasant conversation with Arthur, a performance she had never imagined she would have to give. The knowledge, a heavy cold stone in her gut, was a constant companion. Every shared meal, every casual touch, every quiet evening spent reading in their separate armchairs now felt tainted, a grotesque mockery of the life they had built together. She watched him, her husband of 42 years, for any sign, any tell that might betray his inner turmoil. But Arthur was a master of the mundane, his facade impenetrable. That evening, as dusk settled over their quiet suburban home, Arthur arrived a little later than usual. He mumbled something about a late meeting, a new project at the office, but his eyes avoided hers as he shed his jacket. Elara, stirring the pot roast she knew was his favorite, noticed it immediately. A new cologne, sharp and distinctly masculine, but not his usual scent. It mingled subtly with the faint, sweet floral notes she had detected on his shirts in the laundry basket that morning. A scent that was strikingly similar to the perfume Celeste often wore. A chill snaked down Elara's spine, solidifying Lyra's words into undeniable truth. They ate in silence, the only sounds the gentle clinking of cutlery against china and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Elara observed Arthur across the polished dining table. He speared a piece of tender beef, his gaze fixed resolutely on his plate. He didn't meet her eyes. Not once. His usual easy chatter was absent, replaced by a quiet preoccupation that Elara now understood was not work-related. The pot roast, once a dish that brought them comfort and conversation, now tasted like ash in her mouth. Later that night, as Elara lay in her bed, staring at the familiar patterns the moonlight cast on the ceiling, a profound clarity settled over her. They were playing a game, Arthur and Celeste, a cruel, elaborate charade, and she was meant to be the unsuspecting victim. But Elara was not one to be a victim. She would play their game, yes, but she would do so by her own rules, rules they couldn't possibly anticipate. She closed her eyes, a plan already beginning to unfurl in the quiet corners of her mind. 3 days later, the stage was set for Sunday dinner, a cherished family tradition. Celeste arrived, a vision in a new, exquisitely tailored designer dress, its fabric shimmering softly under the living room lights. An expensive, heady perfume wafted around her, rich with jasmine and amber. Elara, greeting her with a warm smile and a kiss on the cheek, subtly inhaled the fragrance. It was unmistakable. The very same scent that had clung to Arthur's shirts, the one that had been subtly disguised by his new cologne. A fresh wave of disgust washed over Elara, quickly masked by her serene expression. "Elara, darling," Celeste purred, her voice dripping with an almost saccharine sweetness. "You look lovely as ever." Then, her tone shifting to one of carefully feigned concern, she added, "Can we talk for a moment? Privately?" She glanced meaningfully towards the kitchen, where Leo was likely setting out the drinks. "I'm worried about you, Elara, about you and Arthur." Elara's heart pounded, a silent drumbeat against her ribs. This was it, the opening gambit. She nodded slowly, allowing a touch of weary resignation to color her expression. "Oh dear, is everything all right, Celeste?" she asked, her voice soft, designed to portray the naive older woman, a woman too trusting, too oblivious to see the machinations at play. Celeste took Elara's arm, leading her to a secluded corner of the living room, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "Well, it's just... Arthur seems so preoccupied lately. And you, Elara, you seem a little withdrawn. You both deserve to be happy, truly happy." She paused, then pressed on, her eyes bright with a predatory gleam. Perhaps it's time to think about what would make you both happier. Independently, I mean. Maybe it's time to consider a separation, or even divorce." Elara feigned a thoughtful frown, her gaze drifting toward the antique fireplace, as if pondering this truly novel idea. "Divorce," she murmured, drawing out the word, making it sound foreign, almost shocking to her ears. "After all these years, it's such a big step." She looked at Celeste, her eyes wide and innocent. "But if it truly means happiness..." She trailed off, leaving the sentence hanging, a silent invitation for Celeste to continue her carefully rehearsed narrative. Celeste practically preened. "Exactly. Leo would want both his parents to be happy, Elara, even if that means apart. He's such a modern, understanding young man. He'd only want what's best for you both." Her conviction was almost impressive, a chilling testament to her calculated deception. Just then, Leo arrived, his cheerful voice booming from the entryway. "Mom, Celeste, everything all right? Dinner's almost ready." Celeste instantly transformed, her predatory gleam replaced by the facade of a devoted wife. She rushed to Leo, embracing him, her voice filled with an exaggerated affection that Elara found utterly repugnant. "Oh, darling, we were just having a lovely chat about family matters. Nothing to worry about." She linked her arm through Leo's, her smile radiant, yet Elara noticed her eyes, even as she gazed at Leo, constantly drifted towards the door, a subtle anticipation in their depths. Arthur arrived a few minutes later, offering the same excuse about work, his tie slightly askew. His eyes, just for a moment, met Celeste's across the room, a glance that lingered, a fraction of a second too long, laden with a silent message that only Elara seemed to catch. A flicker of shared triumph, a conspiratorial understanding. During dinner, as they discussed their upcoming plans, Celeste casually mentioned her and Leo's planned tropical escape vacation. "Oh, it's going to be glorious," she chirped, her eyes again darting to Arthur, who gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. A silent confirmation of their intertwined agendas, their secret future. Later, as Elara began clearing the dinner dishes, the clinking of porcelain and silverware providing cover. She overheard hushed voices from the living room. Celeste, her voice urgent, almost frantic, whispered, "We can't keep doing this, Arthur. It's too risky. I hate sneaking around." Arthur's voice, low and reassuring, responded, "Not much longer, my dear. Trust me. Soon everything will be exactly as we planned." Then with a dismissive chuckle, he added, "Don't worry about Elara. She doesn't suspect a thing. She doesn't know anything." Elara paused, a half-eaten cucumber sandwich forgotten on a plate in her hand. A small, silent hum escaped her lips, a sound of profound irony. She knew everything, and soon they would know just how much. The week that followed Sunday dinner was a flurry of calculated movements for Elara. She knew she couldn't use Arthur's long-standing family attorney, a man who had handled their wills and minor legal matters for decades. His loyalty would undoubtedly lie with Arthur, and her situation required a stealthier approach. So, under the guise of an overdue visit to a friend in a neighboring town, Elara discreetly contacted Eleanor Vance, a name she had found through a trusted, albeit distant, acquaintance. Eleanor was known for her formidable reputation in complex divorce cases, a woman in her late 40s with keen, intelligent eyes and an aura of quiet competence. Elara arrived at Eleanor's tastefully understated office, her handbag clutched firmly in her hands. The room was hushed, filled with the scent of old books and fresh coffee, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil churning within Elara. She sat across from Eleanor, a woman who radiated an understated strength. "I'm not here to rush into anything, Miss Vance," Elara began, her voice steady. "I simply want to understand my legal standing, to know what my options are, should I choose to pursue them. Before any confrontation, I need to be fully informed." She laid out the bare bones of her suspicions, careful to omit Lyra's name, focusing instead on her own observations. Eleanor listened, her expression unreadable, occasionally jotting notes on a pad. She asked precise, insightful questions, probing gently but thoroughly. Together, they began to review the couple's shared assets, the stately family home, several investment accounts Elara knew little about, and the significant portion of Arthur's family business he co-owned with his brother. Elara had always trusted Arthur implicitly with their finances, a trust that now felt like a gaping wound. As they delved into the intricacies of various deeds and old family documents, Eleanor paused, her gaze fixed on a particular sheaf of aged paper. "Elara," she said, her voice laced with a newfound intrigue. "Did you know about this?" She pushed a document across the desk. It was an old family trust, established generations ago by Elara's maternal grandfather, a man known for his foresight and protective nature. Elara squinted at this faded script. She knew her grandfather had been careful, but she'd never fully understood the extent of his provisions. Her eyes scanned the clauses, a growing sense of revelation blossoming within her. The trust included not only the house she and Arthur lived in, but several other properties, and a significant portion of what she had always assumed were shared investment accounts. Eleanor pointed to a specific paragraph. "Look here, Elara, this is crucial." She read aloud, her voice clear and measured. "It states that this house and the properties linked to this trust can never be sold or transferred to anyone outside your direct bloodline. Not through marriage, not through sale, not through gift." Elara felt a surge of relief. At least the house, her sanctuary, was safe from Celeste's greedy grasp. But then Eleanor continued, her tone shifting, a hint of something akin to awe in her voice. She read another clause, one that sent a jolt of pure shock through Elara, a revelation so profound it momentarily stole her breath. "And this is truly extraordinary. In the event that a marriage is dissolved due to adultery, the innocent party retains all rights to trust property, and the offending party forfeits any claim to assets derived from or connected to said trust." Elara stared at the words, her mind reeling. This wasn't just about the house. This was about a substantial portion of their entire marital estate. The investments, the other properties, they were all tied to this trust. Proving Arthur's affair, which she now had more than enough evidence to do, would not only protect her home but would also safeguard a significant portion of her financial future, rendering Arthur's claims to them null and void. Celeste's grand plan of leaving Elara with as little as possible was not only thwarted, it was spectacularly backfiring. Eleanor leaned back, a small smile playing on her lips. Given these provisions, Arthur likely has no idea. Most people, especially men, assume a standard 50-50 split in a long-term marriage. He's operating under the assumption that half of everything is his by right. He's completely unaware of how these trust protections specifically impact his claim, especially in a case of proven adultery. Elara left Eleanor's office feeling a surge of power she hadn't experienced in years. The air outside felt sharper, clearer. Arthur and Celeste were playing a low-stakes game of manipulation, believing they held all the cards. But Elara now held a royal flush, a hidden hand they couldn't possibly fathom. The facade of ignorance would continue, but now it was a strategic choice, a weapon. That evening, Arthur greeted Elara with an overly effusive kiss, a strained performance of a devoted husband. He asked about her day, about her friend's visit, his questions a little too detailed, a little too forced. Elara played along, recounting a plausible, yet entirely fictional afternoon. She watched him, an odd detachment settling over her. He was already gone, emotionally, and now, soon, he would be gone physically and legally. After dinner, as they sat in the living room, a silence stretching between them like a taut wire, Elara decided to make her move. "Arthur," she began, her voice soft, imbued with a gentle sadness she didn't entirely feel. "I've been thinking about what Celeste said the other day." Arthur stiffened, a flicker of alarm in his eyes before he quickly masked it. "Celeste? What did she say?" His feigned innocence was almost commendable. "About our happiness," Elara continued, meeting his gaze with an expression of profound resignation. "And about the possibility of us going our separate ways." Arthur's eyes widened, a raw, naked excitement momentarily flashing through them, swiftly followed by a clumsy attempt to conceal it. Are you saying you want a divorce, Elara?" The words were barely out, laced with an eagerness he couldn't quite contain. Elara lowered her gaze, feigning heartbreak. "I don't know, Arthur. It's a lot to process. After all these years, but perhaps it's time we both pursued our individual happiness. If that means apart, then maybe that's what we need to consider." She let out a small, fabricated sigh, carefully ensuring it sounded utterly heartbroken. Arthur, fighting a triumphant smile, reached across the space between them and gently took her hand. His touch felt utterly foreign now. "Elara," he said, his voice imbued with a falseness that grated on her nerves. "If that's truly what you want, then I just want you to be happy. You deserve happiness." The hypocrisy was almost comical. Later, lying in her bed, Elara stared at the ceiling, the moon casting its gentle glow through the window. Arthur was asleep in his own room, perhaps already dreaming of his new life with Celeste, of the freedom and wealth he believed he would soon acquire. But Elara knew. She knew she was ready to play a much deeper, more complex game than they could ever anticipate. A game where the rules were in her favor, written long ago by a wise grandfather, and now understood by a woman who was anything but old and boring. The air in the imposing law offices of Gregory Thorne, Arthur's longtime friend and trusted attorney, was thick with unspoken tension, a stark contrast to the faux cheerfulness in the waiting room. Elara arrived promptly, her posture erect, her face a mask of serene composure. She wore a simple, elegant dress, chosen specifically to convey a quiet dignity. Her appearance was a stark contrast to Arthur, who paced the plush carpet of the waiting room like a caged animal, his agitation barely concealed. Celeste sat beside Leo, her hand resting possessively on his thigh, a performative gesture of support that made Elara's stomach churn. Leo, bless his trusting heart, looked utterly devastated, his eyes red-rimmed, clearly believing this was an amicable, albeit heartbreaking, parting of ways for his parents. Gregory Thorne, a man whose tailored suits and booming voice usually exuded authority, began the proceedings with a theatrical flourish, emphasizing the desire for an amicable dissolution, replete with flowery phrases about dignity and fairness for both parties. He spoke as if presiding over a diplomatic summit, rather than a discussion about the dismantling of a 42-year marriage, a situation secretly engineered by his client and his mistress. "Of course," Elara murmured, her voice soft and agreeable. "Dignity and fairness are all I truly desire." She offered a small, sad smile, a perfect portrayal of a heartbroken woman wishing for nothing more than a peaceful resolution. Her immediate compliance seemed to catch Arthur off guard, a faint frown creasing his brow. He had expected resistance, perhaps tears, a dramatic plea for reconciliation. Her quiet agreement, however, was far more unnerving. Thorne, seemingly emboldened by Elara's apparent capitulation, proceeded to lay out the proposed settlement. He presented it with a practiced smoothness, detailing the terms with what he likely considered a generous hand. Elara would receive a modest two-bedroom condo in a bustling downtown area, half of their joint savings account, and a rather conservative sum in alimony, sufficient to maintain a modest lifestyle, but certainly not the one she was accustomed to. In stark contrast, Arthur would retain the sprawling family home, the heart of their life together, along with his substantial share in the family business, their vacation properties in the Hamptons and Aspen, and the vast majority of their investment portfolio. The disparity was not just obvious, it was insulting. Elara's gaze swept over the meticulously prepared documents, her expression neutral. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't show any outward sign of the rage bubbling beneath her composed facade. She simply folded her hands in her lap and remarked, her voice quiet, "This seems rather one-sided, Gregory. Given my 4 decades of contributions to our shared life and to Arthur's career." Thorne, radiating a condescending air, leaned forward, a patronizing smile on his lips. "Now, Elara, we both know Arthur was the primary breadwinner, the driving force behind the family's prosperity. Your contributions, while appreciated, were less direct." He then shifted, his tone becoming more legalistic, almost hinting at a hidden threat. "Furthermore," he continued, "we've uncovered certain irregularities with the original deed for the family home and some of the language within a rather archaic family trust. It's all a bit convoluted." He paused as if expecting Elara to shrink from the legal jargon. "To avoid any lengthy, complicated, and frankly expensive legal battles regarding the property, we believe it's best to simply leave the family home and its associated assets entirely in Arthur's name. It would streamline the process and save everyone a great deal of trouble." The irregularities and archaic family trust were clearly Thorne's clumsy attempt to obscure the truth about the protective clauses Elara had discussed with Eleanor. It was a transparent maneuver, a brazen attempt to steal her family home right out from under her, hoping her age and presumed naivety would prevent her from questioning it. Celeste, who had been silently observing, her hand still firmly on Leo's leg, brightened perceptibly. A triumphant smirk flickered across her lips, her eyes already dancing with the imagined vision of redecorating the master bedroom, perhaps even knocking down a wall or two. Arthur, seemingly sensing Elara's quiet absorption, seized the moment to offer his own brand of patronizing reassurance. "The condo is perfectly manageable, Elara," he said, a forced warmth in his voice. "It's a lovely little place, right downtown. Far less upkeep than the house, really. All that gardening, the maintenance. It's really too much for you to handle on your own now, wouldn't you say?" The implication was clear. She was too old, too frail, too incapable to manage this substantial family home, and he was doing her a favor. Elara's gaze drifted around the room, Thorne smug and self-satisfied, Arthur barely containing his excitement beneath a thin veneer of concern. Celeste, her eyes gleaming with barely suppressed triumph, already envisioning her new life of luxury. And Leo, her sweet, trusting son, his face a picture of discomfort and quiet despair, believing his parents' separation was a mutual, unfortunate end. The tableau was sickening, a portrait of calculated greed and betrayal. She reached out, her fingers lightly touching the folder containing the settlement proposal. With a soft click, she closed it. "I suppose," she said, her voice a calm whisper that somehow cut through the hushed office, "you've thought of everything." She then looked directly at Thorne, her eyes unblinking. "So, Gregory," she asked, her voice clear and precise, "where do I sign?" Leo gasped softly, leaning forward. "Mom, are you sure?" he pleaded, his voice filled with genuine concern. "Maybe you should take some time to think about it. This is a big decision." Elara turned to her son, her expression serene, almost philosophical. She gently squeezed his hand, a silent promise of future explanations. "Sometimes in life, Leo," she replied, her voice imbued with a quiet wisdom that belied her current act, "you have to know when to fight and when to accept reality." Arthur, who had been bracing himself for an argument, for a fight, for anything but this unnerving compliance, looked visibly puzzled, his brow furrowed. He exchanged a quick, confused glance with Celeste, a silent question in his eyes. This was not the Elara he knew, not the Elara he had expected. He didn't understand, and that Elara knew was precisely the point. If you're finding this story compelling, please remember to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on what happens next. The twists are just beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Elara's deceptively calm signing of the divorce papers. The air of quiet tension had dissipated, replaced by a false sense of peace that now hung over the house. Elara was in her rose garden, pruning a particularly unruly bush, finding solace in the rhythmic, mindful task. The sun warmed her back, and the faint scent of earth and blossoms filled the air. Suddenly, the familiar roar of Leo's car shattered the afternoon stillness. He usually arrived with a cheerful honk and a boisterous greeting, but today, the engine cut out abruptly, followed by an ominous silence. Elara straightened, her heart instantly sinking. She turned to see Leo emerge from his car, not with his usual buoyant stride, but with a defeated slump to his shoulders. His face was pale, his eyes wide and vacant, as if he had seen something truly horrific. He was utterly broken, a shattered version of her optimistic son. He stumbled towards the house, bypassing the garden, and collapsed onto the front steps, burying his face in his hands. A raw, guttural sob escaped him. Elara dropped her shears and hurried to him, her hands instinctively reaching out. "Leo, my darling boy, what is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked up, his eyes brimming with tears, his voice a choked whisper. "She's been lying to me, Mom. All this time she's been lying." Elara sat beside him on the cool stone steps, her arm wrapping around his shaking shoulders. She didn't speak, didn't press for details. She simply held him, letting him weep, letting the truth, whatever terrible form it had taken, slowly process within him. He needed to find his own words, to feel the full weight of his pain before he could articulate it. After several agonizing minutes, his sobs subsided into ragged breaths. I found them," he whispered, his voice thick with anguish. "Hundreds of them. Text messages. Between Celeste and Dad." He pulled a crumpled phone from his pocket, its screen still illuminated, displaying a stream of incriminating messages. They were planning it, planning everything. The affair, the divorce, all of it. His voice cracked as he continued, recounting the sickening details. "Celeste was bragging, Mom, bragging about how she was playing both of you, how she'd manipulated Dad, how she'd convinced you to sign those papers." He shook his head in disbelief, his gaze distant. "She called you the old fool who was too blind to see what was happening right under her nose." Elara's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression neutral, her grip on Leo's shoulder unwavering. The confirmation of Celeste's venomous words stung, but it also fueled her resolve. "How did you find them, Leo?" she asked softly. "Lyra," he choked out, his voice tinged with gratitude despite his pain. "Lyra called me. She told me to check Celeste's phone, said she'd been trying to warn Celeste, but she wouldn't listen. Lyra knew where she usually hid her second phone, the one she used for Dad." He took a shuddering breath. "Celeste was in the shower. I just had a gut feeling. I found it, and then I saw everything." He recounted how Lyra had finally confronted Celeste, urging her to confess. "Lyra said Celeste just laughed," Leo whispered, his voice laced with bitter disbelief. "She said she'd worked too hard to get close to our family's money to give up now. She said I was a fool for ever trusting her." Elara's mind reeled with the raw cruelty of Celeste's words, her heart aching for her son. "Where is Celeste now, darling?" she asked, her voice calm despite the storm brewing within her. Leo's eyes flashed with a sudden, fierce anger. "I threw her out, Mom. I confronted her. She denied it at first, of course. Tried to lie her way out of it. But I had the messages. I showed them to her. She didn't even flinch. No remorse. None." He slammed his fist softly on the step. "She just shrugged, Mom. Shrugged and said our marriage was a mistake. Said Dad could give her things I never could. More money, more freedom, more excitement. And when I told her to leave, she just laughed. Said she'd soon be living somewhere much nicer anyway." The image of Celeste's callous laughter, even in the face of her exposed deception, solidified Elara's resolve. This was not just about Arthur anymore. It was about protecting her son from this venomous woman. Elara pulled Leo into a tight hug, stroking his hair. "Oh, my sweet boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I am so sorry. You didn't deserve any of this, none of it." Leo pulled back, his eyes searching hers, a look of profound confusion on his face. "But Mom," he asked, his brow furrowed, "how are you so calm about this? How can you just sit here? Dad betrayed you too. He was supposed to protect us, protect you, and he just let it all happen." Elara looked into her son's heartbroken eyes. It was time. He deserved the truth, not just about their betrayal, but about her quiet, strategic fight. "Come inside, darling," she said, gently leading him into the cool quiet of the living room. "Let's sit down. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you much earlier, but I needed to wait for the right moment." They sat on the couch side by side. Elara took a deep breath and began, her voice soft but firm, recounting everything. Lara's initial, tearful warning, the visit to Eleanor Vance, the discovery of the family trust, the protective clauses, and her calculated decision to play the naive, heartbroken wife. She explained how she had feigned ignorance, how she had accepted reality at the divorce meeting, all to allow Arthur and Celeste to fully reveal the depths of their betrayal and greed. As Elara spoke, a myriad of emotions flickered across Leo's face. Shock, disbelief, dawning comprehension, and finally a profound sense of awe. "You knew," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "All this time you knew what they were doing." Elara nodded, a quieted strength radiating from her. "Yes, my love, I knew. I needed them to believe they had won. I needed them to reveal exactly who they are, without any doubt. It was the only way to truly understand the game they were playing and to ensure we could win ours." Leo sat in stunned silence, absorbing Elara's revelations. The storm of raw emotion on his face slowly gave way to a dawning respect, a new understanding of the woman sitting beside him. He saw not just his mother, but a strategist, a formidable intelligence he had never truly recognized. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet, filled with a newfound admiration. You're incredible. All this time, you were planning." Elara offered him a gentle, knowing smile. "Sometimes, my dear, one must simply observe and prepare. Arthur and Celeste made their choices, and now they will live with the consequences of those choices. That is how life works." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Leo's face. "What about us, though?" he asked, his gaze distant. "I mean, I know Celeste is my wife, or was my wife, but I can't just pretend this didn't happen. What do I do now?" The pain of betrayal was still raw, but now it was laced with a practical concern for his future. "You are the innocent party in all of this, Leo," Elara assured him, taking his hand. "You have every right to protect yourself, your heart, and your future. We will make sure you emerge from this with your dignity intact and your well-being safeguarded." Just then the doorbell chimed softly. Elara glanced at Leo, a silent understanding passing between them. Lyra. Elara opened the door to find Lyra standing on the porch, her shoulders hunched, her eyes downcast. She looked anxious, almost fragile, and there was an air of profound apology about her. I just wanted to check on you both," Lyra stammered, wringing her hands. "I know this is all my fault. I shouldn't have gotten involved." Leo, rising from the couch, quickly moved towards her, his voice firm. "No, Lyra, absolutely not. You saved me. If you hadn't warned me, if you hadn't told me where to look, I would have spent months, perhaps even years, married to someone who was using me, who saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone to wealth. You saved me from a much deeper, much longer deception." He took her hands, his gratitude clear in his eyes. Elara stepped forward, her voice warm and sincere. "Leo is right, Lyra. You chose loyalty and honesty over family convenience, over the comfort of keeping silent. That takes real courage, especially when it involves someone as manipulative as your sister." Lyra's eyes, still clouded with worry, brightened slightly. "I was so afraid," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "So afraid you'd hate me for bringing all this ugliness into your family, for being the one to shatter your peace." Elara gently touched Lyra's arm. "You didn't bring anything into our family, dear. You revealed what was already here, festering in the darkness, poisoning our lives. Sometimes the truth is painful, but it is always necessary. We are profoundly grateful for your bravery." Leo, still holding Lyra's hands, reiterated his profound gratitude, his gaze meeting hers with a depth of emotion that spoke volumes. In that moment, a new tentative bond began to form between them, forged in the crucible of shared betrayal and reinforced by their common values of honesty and decency. It was a bond that promised healing and perhaps, in time, something more. Lyra, still looking hesitant, said, "I should probably leave. You two probably need time." "Nonsense," Elara interjected, a small smile playing on her lips. "I've just pulled my famous pot roast from the oven, and I made extra. I think we could all use some normal conversation right now, and a good meal, wouldn't you say, Leo?" Leo nodded eagerly. "Please stay, Lyra. We'd love for you to join us." Lyra's tense shoulders finally relaxed, a genuine, albeit fragile, smile gracing her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes shining with relief. As they moved towards the dining room, Elara felt a tangible shift in the atmosphere of her home. The toxic cloud of deceit and pretense that had hung over them for so long seemed to have lifted, replaced by an unfamiliar lightness, a genuine warmth. The pot roast, usually a dish associated with Arthur and their family dinners, now symbolized a new beginning, a quiet gathering of those who had chosen honesty. Later, as Elara, Leo, and Lyra cleared the dishes, a more relaxed conversation flowed. Lyra, still processing her sister's actions, mused, "Celeste always used to say that nice people finish last. She always believed you had to be ruthless to get what you wanted in life." Leo, carefully stacking plates, paused, reflecting on his recent painful education. "I used to think that too sometimes," he admitted, a thoughtful frown on his face. "That being too trusting, too decent, made you vulnerable. But now," he looked at Elara, then at Lyra, a newfound clarity in his eyes. "Now I think being decent is still the right choice, but it doesn't mean you have to be naive. You can be kind, but also smart. And you can definitely make sure the people who aren't decent don't win." The sentiment, quiet and resolute, hung in the air, a silent promise of the justice to come. Lying in her bed in the quiet dawn, Elara felt a sensation she hadn't truly experienced in months. Hope. Not the fragile, flickering hope of a wish, but a solid, grounded hope rooted in truth and the promise of new beginnings. The air in the house still carried the faint scent of pot roast from last night's dinner, a comforting aroma that now signified a quiet strength, a rebuilding. With Leo understanding and Lyra by their side, the future, though uncertain, no longer felt like a desolate landscape but an open horizon. The calm before the storm was over. It was time for the wind to pick up. Exactly 63 days after the divorce papers had been signed, a precise measure Elara had kept track of, her phone rang. It was early, the sun barely cresting the horizon. She recognized Arthur's number, and a faint smile touched her lips. She let it ring a few times before answering, savoring the anticipation. "Hello, Arthur," she said, her voice even, infused with a placid calm that belied the situation. On the other end, Arthur's voice was raw with panic and rage, utterly stripped of his usual composed facade. "What the hell have you done, Elara?" he bellowed, his voice distorted by the phone. "My lawyer just called me. He says there's a problem with the house. A serious problem." Elara took a slow, deliberate sip of her freshly brewed coffee, the warm mug comforting in her hands. She gazed out at her rose garden, the morning dew still clinging to the petals. "Oh, that," she replied, her voice almost conversational, as if discussing a minor inconvenience. "Yes, I imagine that came as quite a surprise." A beat of stunned silence followed. Then Arthur's voice returned, laced with a dawning, furious realization. "You knew. You knew about this trust the whole time, didn't you? You knew those damn clauses about adultery and the family line." "Of course I knew, Arthur," Elara confirmed, a cool satisfaction unfurling within her. "It's my family's trust. My grandfather established it to protect our property, specifically from exactly this kind of situation. He was a very wise man, as it turns out." Arthur spluttered, incredulous. "But we're getting divorced, Elara. People get divorced every day. That's normal." Elara's voice hardened, losing its placid edge, though still remarkably calm. "Yes, Arthur, people do get divorced every day, but they usually don't commit adultery with their own daughter-in-law while planning to steal their wife's family home and leave her with nothing. That, Arthur, is not normal. That's a calculated, despicable betrayal." Another stunned silence from Arthur's end, Far longer this time. How long? He finally whispered. The bluster gone, replaced by a chilling uncertainty. How long have you known? Long enough, Elara replied, her voice now sharp, precise. Long enough to document everything. Long enough to ensure Leo was protected. Long enough to protect what truly matters. Arthur automatically corrected her as if by habit. Our house, Elara. We built a life there. No, Arthur, Elara stated firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. Never our house. It was always my family's house, protected by my bloodline. You never owned so much as a single brick of it. Not legally, anyway. And now you will have no claim to it whatsoever. The realization seemed to hit him with the force of a physical blow. His voice, when it returned, was entirely devoid of anger, replaced by a hollow defeat. Where am I supposed to go? Elara took another sip of coffee, allowing a ghost of a smile to touch her lips. I'm sure you and Celeste will figure something out, Arthur. You're both so clever, after all. So resourceful. The irony in her tone was biting, unmistakable. But Elara, please, Arthur pleaded, a desperate edge creeping into his voice. Can't we work something out? I made a mistake. Mistake? Elara interrupted, her voice cutting through his feeble attempt at self-pity. No, Arthur. A mistake is choosing the wrong brand of coffee. What you did was a deliberate, calculated betrayal of your marriage, your son, and your family. There's no working out to be done. The consequences of your choices are simply manifesting. Suddenly, a shrill, furious voice echoed faintly in the background, unmistakably Celeste's. Arthur stammered, his attention clearly diverted. I have to go, he said, his voice regaining some of its frantic urgency. This isn't over, Elara. Elara finished her coffee, placing the mug gently on the saucer. Oh yes, it is, Arthur, she said, her voice serene and utterly resolute. It's been over for quite some time. You just didn't realize it yet. She quietly hung up the phone, the satisfying click echoing in the peaceful morning. The game, for her, was just beginning. The quiet click of the phone seemed to reverberate in the sudden stillness of Elara's living room. She barely had time to process Arthur's defeat before the sound of a car in her driveway heralded new arrivals. An hour after Arthur's panicked call, Leo and Lyra pulled up, their faces grim but resolute. Leo carried a thick manila folder, its contents hinting at darker truths. Mom, Leo said, his voice tight with barely suppressed fury as they entered the house. We found something. Something really disturbing. Lyra nodded, her own face pale. When Leo was packing Celeste's things, he found a hidden compartment in her closet. These were inside. Leo carefully laid the folder on the coffee table, revealing a stack of documents. Lyra picked up an old, familiar document, a copy of Elara's grandfather's will. But this was no ordinary copy. It was heavily annotated in Celeste's elegant, yet now sinister, handwriting. Margins were filled with calculations, question marks, and scribbled notes about property values and trust clauses. Beside it lay a detailed timeline, meticulously outlining Celeste's plan from the initial seduction of Arthur to the proposed divorce settlement, charting every step of her insidious scheme. Elara felt a cold dread creep over her as she examined the evidence of Celeste's meticulous plotting. But the worst was yet to come. Lyra pushed another document forward, her hand trembling slightly. It was a life insurance policy on Elara, taken out 6 months prior, with Celeste listed as the sole beneficiary. Elara's breath hitched. She forged my signature, Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. She was planning to make sure you got as little as possible, and then she would have collected on this. Leo's eyes, wide with horror, met Elara's. She wasn't just planning to steal from you, Mom, he raged, his voice cracking with emotion. She was planning to take your life for money. My God, she was planning to murder you. The words hung in the air, a sickening revelation. As if that wasn't enough, Lyra revealed yet another chilling discovery. Tucked within the folder was a private investigator's report, commissioned by Celeste. It detailed Elara's daily routines, her medical history, even the subtle loopholes Celeste believed existed within the family trust. This wasn't just about greed, it was about control, about calculated elimination. Elara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Take these to the police, Leo, she instructed, her voice remarkably steady, though her hands clenched into fists. Every single document. This is attempted murder, plain and simple. Leo nodded, his jaw set. Already called Detective Miller. He's opening an investigation. He said he's on his way over now to take our statements and collect the evidence. Lyra, still visibly shaken, hesitated, then took a deep breath. There's something else. Something even darker. I've been thinking about it, and it just kept nagging at me. My Aunt Eleanor, my mother's sister, she died 2 years ago. Elara frowned. Yes, I remember. A sudden heart attack, wasn't it? Very sad. She was living with Celeste at the time, Lyra continued, her voice heavy with dawning horror. Celeste was caring for her, administering her medications. Aunt Eleanor had some savings, a nice little house, and when she died, Celeste inherited everything. She was so pleased about it. Not grief-stricken, not even sorrowing, just, please. Lyra's eyes met Elara's, filled with an unspoken dread. I've already told Detective Miller about it. Elara felt a wave of icy shock. It wasn't just Elara. It could have been Eleanor. And what did he say? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He's looking into it, Lyra confirmed, her voice trembling. He said he's considering exhuming Aunt Eleanor's body. The enormity of Celeste's evil settled over them, a suffocating blanket. The woman Arthur had chosen, the woman Leo had married, was not just an adulterer and a thief, but a potential murderer, a black widow spinning a web of deceit and death. Just then, the roar of an engine shattered the tense silence. Arthur's Mercedes, followed closely by a large moving truck, pulled into the driveway. Celeste emerged from the Mercedes, her face contorted in a mask of fury, her designer dress a stark contrast to her venomous expression. She looked like a fury unleashed, storming towards the front door. Elara, her eyes narrowed, made a quick decision. This was not her battle to fight directly. Not anymore. Not with this level of venom. She would let Leo, now fully armed with the truth, face his demons. I'll be inside, Elara stated, her voice calm. You two handle this. She retreated into the house, moving to the large bay window in the living room that overlooked the driveway. From her vantage point, Elara watched the scene unfold. Celeste, her face flushed with rage, began screaming at Leo, her voice shrill and piercing even through the closed window. What have you done, Leo? This is my house. You can't do this. Lyra stepped forward, her small frame surprisingly resolute, placing herself protectively between Celeste and Leo. No, Celeste, Lyra said, her voice cutting through her sister's hysterics, calm and clear. It never was, and it never will be. Celeste, her eyes blazing with irrational fury, lunged at Lyra, her hand raised as if to strike. But Leo was quicker. He moved with a speed Elara hadn't seen in years, stepping between the two women, catching Celeste's arm midair. His grip was firm, unwavering. Get off my property, Leo ordered, his voice low, guttural, and filled with an authority Elara had rarely heard from her son. He turned his fierce gaze from Celeste to Arthur, who stood frozen by his Mercedes, his face a mixture of shock and dawning despair. Both of you, you have 5 minutes to get in that truck and leave, or I'm calling the police. And this time, he added, his voice chillingly precise, they'll be here for more than just a trespassing complaint. The heavy silence that followed Leo's ultimatum was broken only by Celeste's enraged sputtering. Arthur, his face pale and defeated, finally moved. He gently but firmly took Celeste's arm. Come on, Celeste, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. It's over. Just get in the truck. But Celeste, fueled by a potent cocktail of fury and disbelief, was not ready to concede. She wrenched her arm free and pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at Elara, who stood watching from the bay window. This isn't over, Elara, she shrieked, her voice raw with unbridled venom. You think you've won, but I know things about this family. I know secrets that could destroy all of you. Elara, her composure unwavering, slowly unlatched the window and pushed it open, allowing Celeste's shrill voice to echo directly into the living room. Her gaze was steady, piercing, as she looked at her enraged former daughter-in-law. The only secrets being destroyed today are yours, dear, Elara replied, her voice calm and clear, cutting through Celeste's hysteria like a sharp blade. Detective Miller is very interested in your relationship with your aunt, Eleanor, particularly about the circumstances of her untimely demise. The effect was instantaneous and profound. Celeste's face, moments ago flushed with fury, drained of all color. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, the fire in her eyes replaced by a chilling terror. She stumbled backward, clutching at Arthur, who, though still shaken, quickly pulled her towards the moving truck. He practically shoved her into the passenger seat, then got behind the wheel. With a screech of tires and a cloud of dust, Arthur's Mercedes and the moving truck sped away, disappearing down the tree-lined street. The last vestige of their toxic presence vanished, leaving behind only the lingering scent of fear and a newfound peace. Leo and Lyra came inside, emotionally drained but with a quiet triumph in their eyes. Leo sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. "It's over, Mom," he breathed, a profound relief washing over him. "The house part is over, yes," Elara corrected gently, sitting beside him. "But Celeste still needs to face the full consequences of her actions. This is just the beginning of her reckoning." Lyra, still looking a little shaken, nodded in agreement. "I can't feel sorry for her," she admitted, her voice low. "She chose this path, step by step, decision by decision. It was never forced upon her." The three of them then moved into the kitchen, a quiet determination settling over them. They began preparing dinner together, the familiar rhythm of chopping vegetables and stirring pots, a soothing balm to their frayed nerves. It wasn't a celebration in the usual sense, but a quiet acknowledgement of their survival, a testament to their integrity in the face of such profound malice. As they worked, Elara observed Leo and Lyra. There was a comfortable ease between them now, a shared understanding forged in the crucible of betrayal and truth. She saw a genuine, lasting connection growing, far deeper than any superficial attraction. Leo, reflecting on the stark contrast between Celeste and Lyra, voiced his thoughts. "Celeste showed me exactly who she was," he said, peeling potatoes with a practiced hand. "Every lie, every manipulation, it was all out in the open. But Lyra," he paused, glancing at her with a gentle smile, "she's been showing me who she is too. Her honesty, her courage, that's what truly matters." Lyra blushed, returning his gaze with an answering warmth. 6 months later, the air in Elara's home was filled with the warm aromas of roasting turkey and spiced cider. It was Thanksgiving, a day traditionally dedicated to gratitude and family. Leo and Lyra, now openly engaged, were helping Elara prepare dinner, their laughter echoing through the kitchen, a joyful counterpoint to the clinking of dishes. The doorbell chimed, and Elara opened it to find Detective Miller standing on her porch, a respectful smile on his face. "Good evening, Elara," he said. "I thought you'd want an update." He stepped inside, his voice grave but resolute as he addressed them all. "Celeste Thorne has been formally charged with multiple counts of insurance fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud in relation to the trust and the life insurance policy." He paused, then continued, his voice dropping slightly. "The exhumation of Celeste's aunt, Eleanor Vance, revealed traces of digitalis poisoning. We've officially opened a first-degree murder case against Celeste. The evidence is quite compelling." A collective gasp went through the room. The true depth of Celeste's evil was now undeniable, exposed for the world to see. "As for Arthur," Detective Miller continued, "he's been charged as an accessory to fraud. He's cooperating fully with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's facing considerable jail time, but he's offered to testify against Celeste." Elara looked at Leo, then at Lyra. It had been a difficult year, a journey through the darkest corners of human deceit, but they had emerged. They had faced the truth, protected each other, and fought for justice. A sense of profound relief washed over her, mingled with a quiet pride. "We survived this," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We survived this with our integrity intact." As the evening drew to a close, plates cleared and candles flickering, Elara raised her glass of sparkling cider. To family, she toasted, her eyes sweeping over Leo and Lyra, her heart full. To strength, to honesty, and to new beginnings. Her new downtown condo, she decided, wouldn't just be for her. It would be a refuge for other divorced women, a place to heal and rebuild. And as for Leo and Lyra, she would help them plan their wedding, a celebration of true love and unwavering loyalty right here in her beautiful rose garden. The game was truly over, and life, vibrant and hopeful, had just begun.